Part 2, Chapter 10, 1934, Rome, Georgia. Danny was doing homework by candlelight at the kitchen table. His mother was at the stove, her dark brown hair in a bun, and she talked to him over her shoulder. "I really hope your father came right with the deal today. It'll be a big job and last him for a while. But Danny, love, I want to talk to you about something." Annie O'Neill still had a slight Irish lilt in her voice, passed down from her father, who had come to Canada to find a better fortune. Fortune had left their family some time ago, Danny figured. Roughly when his mother married Archie and came to America. "Are you listening, Danny?" "Yes, Ma." He stopped writing and looked up at her. He looked like her. The same dark hair and very dark brown eyes. The same stubborn mouth that yet smiled easily. It seemed the only thing he got from his father was size. Annie was small and delicately built. Danny towered above her at just 16 years old, and he was strong and wide through the shoulders. "Danny, I want you to finish school. Your father is pressing more and more for you to go to work with him in the building business. He's going to get worse about it too. I want to make it clear to you that it is not what I want for you. I've talked to Mr. McFadden, and he says he can look at giving you an apprenticeship at the mill until you graduate. That means you can get an educated job, and I know they've paid before for their promising workers to get an extra education. I don't want you to be a builder. I want you to have a job with a future, where you have a chance of having a life, of not worrying where your next meal comes from. I want you to do more than survive. You must be able to dream." "He's not going to like it." "No, he isn't. But both of us are going to have to go straight against his wishes. But we have to do it, Danny. We might have to do without for a few months, and there will be bitter fights. But I want you to know that you must not give in for my sake. This is my wish, and I stand by it no matter how hard things get, because that is not the life for you to lead." "He might back off if he gets the deal to build this barn." "He might get worse, because he's already hinted to me that it'll be too big a job for a man to do alone, and he needs his son to pull his weight. If he doesn't get it, he'll be on about you doing your share. But this is your share, Danny. Stay in school, graduate, build a better life, not a barn. I cannot see both my men fall into despair and give up. Your father wasn't always like this, Danny. When I met him, he was full of plans and dreams, and he talked a big game. We married in a hurry when he was going to war. He went away. I had you, and when he came back, he was so different. I thought he had really died in the war, and some other man had come back with the voice and the face of the man I loved. I thought he would come back, that I could heal him. But he never did, and he did not want my help. The war broke something in him. I don't think the Archie I loved and married survived having to kill. I mourn him, Danny, and I pray and work and wish for you to have a life different from ours. I will do anything to see you with enough, to have a good life and a wife and laugh and play with your children. Your father never even knew how to touch you or speak to you. They took the love and the life from him, and I mourn him, Danny, but I have given up the hope that he can come back. Now I have you, and that must be my joy." He dipped his head. She walked over, ran her fingers through his hair, lifted his chin so he had to look up to her. "You must be strong, Danny. You must not give in." "I don't think I can take it if he touches you again. I can't let him hit you, Mom." "You will walk away from it, Annie. Go to one of your friends' houses, take a walk, do what you must. Do not give in, and do not try to help me. It is going to cause much more harm. It makes him angrier. I know how to talk him out of it. I always calm him down in the end." "He's not going to calm down if you go up against him on me working with him. I will handle it, Danny, and you must stay out of it. Get yourself educated and with a good job. Move out as soon as you can. Build a life. I'll come back and fetch you. I can't leave him, Danny. Why not? You said yourself the man you married didn't come home from the war. To me, he's not even my father. She sighed. I made a promise when I married. Put your homework away and let's eat first. We don't know when we'll be back. It was a peaceful, yet tense part of their evenings. Alone together they could dream, and Annie was a great builder of castles in the air. Yet the fear hung over them of when he would step in and how he would be when he did. When he had been little, she would make up fantastic stories in which they had wild adventures. Her stories, now that he was older, were dreams for his future. Danny played along, but he had no idea how it would happen. Annie could seem to see a plan, but he knew his father wasn't going to allow it. Danny was increasingly frightened for their future, especially for his mother's sake. It wasn't so bad the times he got a knock or two over the years, but it was getting too frequent that Annie had horrific bruises on her arms or a split lip. Archie burst through the door as they were doing the dishes. They both tensed up, but he was in a good mood. Annie, I got the job. I can start on Monday. He says I can find a couple of good men to help, and we get a month to get the barn up, and the pay is good. Annie's smile was genuine. That is wonderful, dear. Sit down, the food is still warm. We weren't sure what time you'd be back. Let me get you a plate. Danny, put on some coffee for your father. I don't want coffee. Get me a beer, boy. We don't have any. Archie looked at him narrowly. If I talked like that to my father, he would have boxed my ears. Danny stood with his face set like stone. Would you like coffee instead, father? Yeah. Not even something to celebrate the good news within this house. It's like the prohibition is still going on in here. Danny wished it was. His father had been easier to deal with when it had been harder for him to get his hands on alcohol. Archie turned his attention to his food and his wife listening attentively as he told her about the job's promises. It sounded too good to be true, and Danny had heard it all 1,000 times before. Every new job was the one that would be a new start, and also the one that he should leave school for and start earning his wages like a man. He knew it was unusual for a working family in their position to have their son graduate. Most of his peers had dropped out in 7th grade and were working to help support their families. So far, Annie had made sure it didn't happen. He had side jobs, as many as he could manage, and often he only came home at dark. But he simply couldn't see how much longer his mom would be able to resist his father's demands. But life rolled on, and for a while everything did seem a little better than usual. Archie kept busy, forced into sobriety by the shortness of money. Annie was very quiet, though, and Danny never quite knew what happened that he wasn't present to hear and see. He felt there was an undercurrent running that made him nervous. It was halfway through the month that things started going awry. Archie's friend Jackman came back into town. Jackman had gained his notoriety during Prohibition. He was a moonshiner and had an unsavory reputation. Rumor had it he killed a Native American woman on a reservation. He was certainly always on the move, though it might just have been related to his moonshine runs. Archie came home to announce happily that he had brought Jackman onto his building team. He said he owed me a favor, and since I'm a man short and my son won't do the right thing and my wife is going against me, he'd stand in and help out while I'm in need. Annie pursed her lips. Danny got up and walked out. It would only get worse if he stayed. There was an ugly thing building in him, and he didn't know how long he could still contain it. No good could come from it. He was in no place to change their lives. Patience was the game. He had to bide his time, and he was afraid, because time was running out. Jackman was bad news. He spent even more time away, took his homework to his arithmetic teacher, Dean Calloway's house, so he could help in Dean's wife's garden and then sit on their veranda in the sunset and do his homework. Linda Calloway brought him homemade lemonade and often slipped him some extra coins. "He has it bad again, Danny." He nodded, pulling his face wryly. "Ma'am, I think I'm going to have to pack up and leave. My father's making Mom's life hell. He hits her, I know. I don't know what to do. I'm scared for us and I don't want to leave her, but I can't work with him. I don't mind work, but I can't be around him. I think we actually hate each other. And I'm trying to keep sane, but there's this thing boiling in me, and if I don't keep it in, I don't know what will happen." She shook her head. "I'll speak to Dean. There has to be a plan, and you're too smart to just give it up. It won't help your mom. It would break Mom's heart. She's got this whole plan laid out, and I can't see it ever working." Dean came into the yard from the street. He was a tall, handsome man with black hair graying at the temples. "Hello, Linda." He briefly kissed her on the cheek and she smiled up at him. "Good afternoon, Danny. How about some of that lemonade, dear?" He pulled out a chair and leaned over to look at Danny's homework page, nodding approvingly. "How have you been, Dan? I'm sorry to hear about your dad." Danny's head snapped up. "What about my father?" Dean looked taken aback. "The trouble with the building job." Danny leapt upright out of his chair. "What happened?" He remembered himself. "I'm so sorry. What happened, sir?" Dean took a deep breath, blew it out slowly in a whooshing sound. "I seem to have put my foot in my mouth. I'm so sorry, Danny. Your father and his friend got caught, accused of, well, certain supplies went missing and the workers under your dad hadn't been paid. There was a fight between him and one of his hired men and he turned bad. The other guy was taken to hospital with a broken jaw. Your father has been let go and Dr. Gerhard is pressing charges." "When?" "I heard in town just now. It must have gone down earlier today." "I have to go home, sir. I have to go check on Mom." He was running before he was off the veranda.